Good morning, everyone. Good day.
Morning.
In case I forget to say so at the end of class today, we'll be taking a break next week. I'm participating in a conference, the Parliament of World's Religions in Chicago next week. So while I hope to see Eileen perhaps and Art in person, that would be nice. I'm not sure it'll happen. But Ella, I get to see you all the time in person in Palm Springs. But I think it's probably more prudent if I try not to teach next week and concentrate on being where I am. So apologies. We're about to get into today. We're going to get into the thick of it, into one of the most complicated and intriguing parts of the Talmud, which is probably one of the least Talmudic parts of the Talmud that I know. And that is because it has so many parallels in non-Talmudic or not even non-Jewish literature. And so we'll get to that in a moment, but I want to help us understand how the Talmud got to where it's going, this kind of chain of this stream of consciousness on the Talmudic page. Just right before we get started, the text is in the chat box. I hope you can see it if you don't already have the text. For those that are joining us for the first time, I think Jimmy and Julaine, is that the names?
Correct. Yeah, you said it correctly.
Welcome. Good to have you with us. So we send out the text sheet that we're using usually the day before, the Wednesday before, and the day after, that is on Fridays. We send out a link to the recording because lots of our people can't always come every week. So that's how we have a much larger group that's on the screen right now that follows the class. We're in the Tractate of Br'achot of Blessings that has to do with blessings and prayer in the Talmud, but as we've already seen and we'll see today, lots of other stuff. Sometimes the editing of the Talmudic page is from on the same topic and just, oh yeah, there's another aspect. Oh, but you said that, but how about another place you said this on the same topic? And sometimes, as we've seen in the last 2 or 3 times we met, the chain of traditions is merely, if I don't know if that's the right word, but is only because it's the same rabbi who's quoted, Rav Yehuda here in so many of the paragraphs that we had. Now we're going to see a little bit more of connection due to the topic, and the topic is brought up in the last tradition we did, the last paragraph we did last week. I will quickly read it. Rav Yehuda, in the name of Rav, said, 3 matters require mercy: a good king, a good year, and a good dream. And so we're going to continue today to go into those 3 things: a good king, a good year, and a good dream. Meaning that we depend upon God's mercy, according to this Talmudic idea here, understood by. Okay, we've got a problem with the echo. Okay, that might do it, Mother Lena. Understood by, I think, Rashi, to say you've got to pray. When it says God's mercy is needed for these things, as a response to prayer. And remember, the context of this chapter is having to do with giving thanks for miracles that it went on to the length of prayer and what does that do. And so now we're back to these 3 things. This is part of wisdom literature. It's not really halakha. It's not Jewish practice. It's kind of Jewish thought and Jewish feelings on these topics. Okay. Did anybody want to say anything about last week or the weeks before that struck them? Comments are always welcome, and many of you continue to write to me individually. You're always welcome to do so. But before we get going. Okay, I'm using my favorite cup at my mother's house. I don't know if you can see that. This is circa 92, probably 93. It's the 5 girls, and it's rather faded, but coffee tastes much better in this mug than it does at home, I have to say.
I go into it now.
All right then. So let's begin. And I remembered to give numbers to the paragraphs this week, so it should be a little bit easier. And why don't we begin? Why don't we begin with you, Malka, if you could, the first paragraph.
Mhm. Rabbi Yochanan said, 3 matters are proclaimed by the Holy One, blessed be he, himself, famine, plenty, and a good leader. Famine, as it is written, for the Lord has called for a famine, and it shall also come upon the land. 7 years. Plenty, as it is written, and I will call for the grain and will increase it and lay no famine upon you. A good leader, as it is written, and the Lord spoke unto Moses, saying, see, I have called by name Bazalel, son of Uri, son of Hur, of the tribe of Yehuda, Judah.
Okay. So kind of straightforward and kind of duh. Kind of like, don't we know that everything is from God? Why these 3 things in particular? Well, this part of wisdom literature, I think, in general, in all cultures, is to state the obvious sometimes, right? Things that we all know. I always think of, you know, I don't know, but I'm thinking right now, it popped into my head. There's in Pirkei Avot, most of our rabbinic wisdom literature that we know is from Pirkei Avot. It's just one after the other after the other. But the embarrassed person doesn't learn. Yeah, because if you're bashful, if you're embarrassed, though Baishan could mean either bashful or embarrassed. I'm not embarrassed about something you've done, but you're embarrassed to speak out. You won't learn if you don't ask questions, right? Well, that's kind of like duh, I guess, maybe not. But and yet all those duh sayings, that's part of wisdom literature. And sometimes things are very tricky and maybe controversial. There's nothing terribly controversial from a biblical point of view, from a classical Jewish point of view, not from a 21st century or 20th century point of view, but we'll get to that in a second, to say, well, yeah, hunger is due to God, and I'll give you a verse, famine, right? Famine. I'll give you a verse, a proof text. Again, if Dan was here, he would be smiling because proof text, not in the way that we use proof in math, or the way he uses, I don't use mathematics, as a proof, a mathematical or scientific proof, but as a anchor into what you want to say. This intertextuality of not just the Hebrew Bible itself, but how rabbinic literature has these somebody once described, one of my professors used to talk about telephone poles and telephone wires connecting them. That doesn't really mean much to young people today. They're like, what's a telephone pole? What's a wire? What do you need that for? This connections, and for those of you that have a background in New Testament studies, certainly the Gospels, right? There's a constant back and forth, though, as we saw in our study. Some of you, we participated together in a joint study group, Christian Jewish study group, our study of the Acts of the Apostles. There's a constant throwing back lines, anchors, if you will, between the newer text and the older text, which is meant to not necessarily say, oh, this is what, in other words, not to say, oh, this is what it means. It means something different. I think that's a common misconception, certainly in the Jewish world. When Christianity and Judaism began to debate with each other as separate entities later on, 2-3 centuries after the founding, that was the different story. But in the beginning, it wasn't to say, oh, this is the meaning, and when you thought anything else was wrong, it's to say, oh, this is one of the legitimate meanings, one of the ways that we find text, we ring the text for droplets of meaning, which is my metaphor for midrash, right? And so here it's done specifically in rabbinic literature. So the starting point, unlike a lot of midrash that we've done over the years as a group, the starting point isn't the biblical text and let's figure out what each verse means. The starting point is something else you're talking about. Is it, oh yeah, as it says in the Bible, right? Something that it's not my style in giving sermons, but some of you know from different places you've been to. Okay, so that's as far as a famine is concerned. The same thing in the opposite. Now, why is it still worth saying in Rabbi Yochanan's time, right, 3rd century, to say this, or 4th century, to say this this particular thing, 3rd century? Because some people still would say, oh, damn, what bad luck we got, right? There's been year after year of drought. No, it's not that bad things happen. It's that God is in control, even of the bad, as God is in control of the good. Okay. But then it adds a third thing, which is not the weather. The third thing, though, is the clincher. It's a social issue, right? It's people, it's human beings, and a good leader. And interestingly enough, it doesn't talk about a king, right, which was in the previous paragraph from last week. It talks about a leader in general. And I really like where this goes, from a leadership point of view. Many of you know over the years, I dealt with the question of leadership in my years in Israel around a fellowship for 17 years of spiritual community leaders. I'm still in touch with many of them. You have met some of them over the years who have come to visit Palm Springs. Some of them come from time to time and join us in study or in Shabbat prayer. Ofer Beit Halachmi is one of them who comes from time to time. Jonathan Rudnick. And I've really given a lot of thought to what does leadership mean in what context and how fluid that idea is. There's a lot of literature on leadership. I've gained from it, reading from, but for me, it's always been something slightly different. And that's what attracts me to this particular section of Talmud. When it goes into detail as to a good leader, what the God's mercy affects whether we have a good leader or a bad leader. The example is not Moses, it's not Aaron, it's Bezalel. So I had asked in our announcements that if you could take a look at Exodus 31 and what was it, 37, whatever I asked for, because that gives the background of Bezalel for those that don't remember or don't know who Bezalel was. Bezalel was the chief architect that Moses dealt with in order to build the Mishkan, the tabernacle in the desert. Bezalel, fast forward to the 20th century, is also Ella. What's Bezalel?
It's a school in Jerusalem for the arts and for fine arts and other art things related. Right,
architecture, for instance, yeah. And so the first school of art, higher education school of art in the pre-statehood, right? It's before 1948, was called Bezalel. Right, something that I think that both Elle and I, or others here, if you've lived in Israel, we share that joy with all the criticism that I have, and you know what I have to say about Israel right now. This day on this week, it seems to get worse every day, but it'll get better sometime. But the idea that with this connection, you live in a culture, and that is the dream. That's the Ahad Ha'am vision of modern Zionism. Is to live this Hebrew culture, which is Jewish culture, not necessarily in the halachic way, or not just in the halachic way, but in the cultural way as well. So that's why Bezalel School of Art is called Bezalel, because this was the first craftsperson who's described. He's not described so much, but his work is described. Okay, so we're at Bezalel now, and maybe it's also, from a biblical point of view, it's also noteworthy that he is from the tribe of Judah. We like to see our leaders from the tribe of Judah. That's a Davidic thing, right? While there were leaders from the tribe of Benjamin, right? Shaul, the king, Mordechai, in later times, there is that kind of current as well. But mostly, we'd like to see our leaders from the tribe of Judah. That's how it worked out. Okay, so any comments or questions on this last section? Okay, please, for our relative newcomers, if I'm going too fast or if I'm stating things that I think are, please don't be the bashful one who doesn't ask and therefore doesn't learn. So feel free to stop me at any time and say something. I have a tendency to go on, as Richard will tell you.
About the text?
About
It surprised me that something was said, because maybe it's probably there a lot in the Talmud, but I never remember reading it that way. Baruch hu ba'atzmo. He blesses himself.
Great. That's a great point. Good. I'm glad you brought that up. We have a lot of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I don't think I mentioned it maybe in our first time. The Talmud doesn't use Adonai or Elohim. Talmud doesn't use Hashem. Hashem is a relatively new thing in Jewish literature in Hebrew. Instead, it's Hakadosh Baruch Hu, right? That's actually I think the Professor Shenan used to correct us. You're supposed to pronounce it Hakadosh Baruch Hu, not Hakadosh Baruch Hu, right? That would be the Ashkenazic pronunciation, but it is the Holy One, blessed be him. I often translate, if I get involved in the translating, I'll change it to the Holy One or the Holy Praised One, because it doesn't matter why. And but here so that's God's name in the Talmud, Hakadosh Baruch Hu. But here it's Hakadosh Baruch Hu Ba'atzmo. God's self did this. So I think it's intensifying, probably to rule out the mediation, if I can use that word here, of angels. Right? You know, again, we mentioned this yesterday, I think, in what we were doing, or recently we mentioned the fact that in the Haggadah, Shel Pesach, in the Seder night, we say, you know, God self did this, right? Hu v'lo malach. God did it and not an angel, right? No, and it's like when you want to meet somebody who's you want access to somebody. Are you going to get access to that person? Or are you being handled by, you know, the assistant, the secretary, whoever it is, right? Right. So I want to say, you never have to go through Richard to get to me. I know some of you think you've got to call Richard and get permission, leave a message. No, that's not the case at all. For those of you who are not our regulars, Richard is the kind of guy that the brunt of all my jokes. He's there, Richard Jeffrey. He's a good man, and I know that he thrives on this kind of a thing. If I don't do it, he starts to feel, you know, unwanted and unappreciated, left out. Yeah. In any case, you can always call me directly. Okay. So, all right, so this bit of wisdom, Malka, great point. Anything else? Okay, then. So, Sister Claire, number 2, would you read for us?
Yitzhak said, "One may only appoint a leader over a community if he consults with the community, as it is stated. And Moses said unto the children of Israel, See, the Lord has called by name Bezalel, son of Uri, son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah. The Lord said to Moses, Moses, is Bezalel suitable in your eyes? Moses said to him, Master of the universe, if he is suitable in your eyes, then all the more so in mine. The Holy One, blessed be he, said to him, Nevertheless, go and tell the people. Moses went and said to Israel, Is Bezalel suitable in your eyes? They said to him, If he is suitable in the eyes of the Holy One, blessed be he, and in your eyes, all the more so he is suitable in ours.
Okay, so the problems in the language were typos and suitable. What happens is that the English translation that comes up in Sefaria is a very embellished translation. It's based on Steinsaltz's commentary / paraphrase of the Talmud in Hebrew, which was translated to English, and that's what you find on the page of Talmud in Sefaria. That's their default. I think you can change it to something else, to an older translation if you like. And that saves me a lot of time not having to translate myself. But what I do is I pluck out the parts that I think are too wordy. There's too much that's added. I want to give the feeling to the people that are with us in this group that the Talmudic text is sparse. It's telegraphic, as we used to say in Hebrew, the telegraphy, which I don't know if you say that in English about a style. It's very truncated, concise. And so that should have been, is he suitable, as opposed to a suitable candidate, right? They added the word candidate. Suitable, that's the Talmud just says, is he suitable? Okay. But that's not the point. That's just that's an issue of translation and the words themselves, which is the first step, by the way, of any ancient text. We have to, first of all, try to understand the words. What do they mean? Or put it in our own words. But now the idea, anybody have anything to say about, so what's going on here? We had God's mercy was spelled out, needed for the weather, for famine, and for blessed crops, for plenty. and also for a leader, and before that, the king, and then it went back, and then the next tradition about a leader. We get the example of Salah. So what is this going in depth, this digging in that Rabbi Yitzchak does? What does it give us? Where's it bringing us?
Rabbi?
Yeah.
Well, I kind of feel as though in the end, the Holy One, blessed be He, is the one who's deciding here. Because he takes it to Moses, Moses throws it back on him. Well, if it's okay with you, it's okay with me. And then he goes to the people. Well, if it's okay with the Holy One, blessed be He, then it's hunky-dory with us. So it looks as though God's really making the decision here.
So if I was to translate your words, you're kind of saying it's a farce.
Not really.
In a word, yes, but
So how do you see it, Ella?
I
I thought, did you say not really?
I think he's just getting affirmation that he decided on something, and if God decided and he brings it to the people and the people decide on the same thing, on the same person.
Okay, so you see it in a positive light. Eileen apparently doesn't. Eileen?
I see it in a positive light.
Yeah, I know you do. Yeah, I hear you. Eileen?
Well, it seems as though God's made a decision on somebody, and I would say he's testing the community to see if they agree with his decision. I mean, if they're going to, they don't want to go against him.
Right.
God, I wouldn't think that they would.
Right. So there's a kind of divide here between the cynics and the generous of heart, perhaps.
I'm with Harold on this, Rabbi. I mean, this is like, you're in the staff meeting, and the president of the company is there, or the rabbi, and they speak first. If God really wanted the opinion of Moses and the people, he would have said first, what do you think? Instead of saying, this is what I think. Do you agree with me or not? Of course it's going to agree. The chief executive officer says, we're gonna pick Chaim Smendrick for the new position. Everyone's gonna say, yeah, oh, that's a good choice.
So back to leadership and what does leadership mean, right? An example I used to use when you read all this advice, leaders, they should ask the people what the people, their underlings, what they think, get their opinion first. And sometimes it feels like many of you said, it's going through the motions. I'm reminded of Genesis 1, right? God creates each thing, each area of the universe, and slowly narrows down to the sixth day, and God creates the animal world. And then what does God say? Anybody remember?
It is good.
No, it is good is at the end of every paragraph. But on the sixth day, though, God creates the animals, and then God says,
Doesn't he says Kitov?
all that is true. He does say Kito. He says good, but then God says, though, Naseh Adam b'tzalmenu kidmutenu, shall we create humanity, human beings, in our image? And the question there, of course, is who is God talking to? So the traditional rabbinic response is God is talking to the angels. He's like getting advice from the angels. But of course, you say, really? That's advice? God will do what God wants to do, right? But by the way, a more modern or more contemporary understanding of that verse is a cool one as well. God looks at the earth, everything that God just created in the last 6 days, from the mammals going backwards to the fish and the birds and the trees and the plants and the water and the dry earth and the lights and the universe and the stars, everything. And God says, no, what do you think, guys? Should we top this off by creating a human being, which is a lovely way of seeing it, because it could at least, maybe it would be nice if it taught us a little bit of humility, right? We came last. But here it seems to me that, that's the advice. A good director, a good leader always asks his leadees, what they think, even though, as Richard said, in so many cases, it's clear what's going to happen, right? All right. Did any of us think that somebody in God's universe would have said, no, I don't think you should do it? By the way, the angels do. In rabbinic literature, the angels argue with God and say, no, don't do it. It's not worth it. They're going to mess up. Right. So it's a leadership kind of a tactic, but there's also something, it's naive, but there's something kind of, it reflects reality, but it's also less cynical. There's something nice. Well, but God's said, I want Bezalel to do it, but you know what? But I want you, Moses, to sign off. Now, did God really expect him to sign off? But then Moses, before signing off, talks to the people, and the people say, well, if you do it, yes, it could be a game, it could be a farce, but there's also something kind of nice about it. And Sasha's nodding her head.
Yeah, God being our example, like when God visits the sick, and he's our example in that, and then having God as an example in this thing, no?
Right. Yeah, God is the role model par excellence. Okay, we choose to see it anyway, but again, who is the leader that they're talking about here? That's what I like. The leader is an artisan. The leader is the story of a creative personality, which is really interesting as well, because the creation, and I'm purposely using that word, the creation / building, erection, making of the tabernacle uses the same words as Martin Buber discovered early in the 20th century, uses the same words, the same patterns, language patterns as the creation of the world story. And we just happened to see this yesterday in the word Vaychal, as opposed to Vayelech that we have in the Masoretic text, but Vaychal as Moses completed, and the word that's in the text in Exodus, Vaychal, Moses completed, which is just like Vaychulu Hashamayim Va'aretz, and God completed the creation. So it's not by to me, it's striking that the example of a leader here and the process of becoming a leader is actually not a political leader, but a cultural leader, if you will.
But am I missing the point? But I don't see in this passage what he wants Bezalel to create.
So that's why I asked you to look at 31 and 36. The Talmud very often speaks to people that are embedded in biblical literature, especially the Torah, right? If you say Bezalel in certain circles, they'll think only of the school of art in Jerusalem.
No, I mean, I know that he was later chosen, but it doesn't say here in this passage, it doesn't say what he wants Bezalel to do.
Right, because it's assumed that people know.
I get you.
Yeah, it's assumed that it's kind of like you don't go into detail. That's the challenge that we have coming to a text. We're visiting, we have a window into a world which is foreign to us in so many ways, not just because they're living under Roman or Babylonian powers, and which are very different than living in the United States or in France or in Mauritius, although what Corinne tells me about Mauritius, perhaps there are some parallels to living under. Okay, well, we don't want to get flagged by the Mauritius secret police, so we'll leave it at that. But there's such a gap between us and for whom this literature, those that this literature records some of their lives, and for whom it was written, whom it was composed. Yeah, and even by the way, Steinsaltz's great contribution to Talmudic study was making it accessible to the Israeli public. And then afterwards, when it's translated into English, Steinsaltz didn't translate into English as far as I know. I don't think he knew English very well. He knew some English. I did hear him speak in English once. He visited once in Stockholm when I was the rabbi. But not he wouldn't have done the translating himself. But to bridge that gap, on the other hand, Steinsaltz bridged the gap to the people that lived in the world that he knew in the state of Israel in the 70s, 80s, 90s. you know, when the project was going on. By the way, he passed away, I think last year. Yeah, I think anyway. So we always have that gap that we're trying to fill. Okay. So Bezalel, for those that don't know, was the one who created the tabernacle. That's that, and that's a huge section of the book of Exodus. Yeah. Did I see somebody's hand go up for a second? Eileen?
I was just wondering if he chose an artisan and not somebody political to be in competition with Moses and his authority.
No.
Yes, but then I would think, why would the Talmud not take Moses as the example of leader? In other words, if you want to teach about leadership, that God needs, we need God's mercy for a king, which is the previous paragraph. Why not talk about a king, one of the kings? Or why not talk about Moses? Why would the Talmud go to the artisan? I think your question is your statement was more about God and less about the author or the editor of the Talmud, right?
Right.
Yeah. But so I guess where we could certainly both agree perhaps is that, and to me, this is what this is what's striking here, is that this too is leadership. This is a form of leadership that has nothing to do with how strong you are in your arms and how you can manipulate people, really. This is how you manipulate copper and silver and gold, or how you utilize your mind. I think it has interesting implications when we think of the responsibility of people in computer science, in engineering, in certainly the arts and music. We think at all of them in terms of leadership. I was the program that helped me a lot in my own thinking of what I should be doing in this world was I was in the Mandel School for leadership, and there was a fellow there who was a conductor. So I met this guy, I can't remember his name now, but he went on to be the conductor of the Lithuanian, that happens a lot in countries, Lithuanian Philharmonic or something like that, or Estonian or something like that, one of those countries. But I think he had an early TED Talk. He was like one of the early Israelis that had a TED, like a real TED Talk, that talked about how the conductor, he came in, he did for us, for our group, he did this lovely, lovely workshop, like an hour and a half long, on how conductors are leaders, the leadership styles of conductors, Leonard Bernstein as opposed to others taking videos. I guess when I'm saying there's leadership, what I like about there's leadership in every aspect of life, and not just politics, right? Not just where there's kochanut, where there's
battling.
No, koach is the word is strength, where we've, politics today is a lot. It's positioning. It's not bullying. Anyway, so good. All right. Anything else before we move on? Did you want to say something? Jimmy, is that it?
No, I didn't. I'm so sorry. I was cleaning my glasses.
Oh, no, not at all. Okay, great.
Okay.
All right, then. So, Jimmy, you want to read the next section for us, number 3? Do you have the text?
No, I don't. I'm so sorry.
Oh, okay.
didn't
Nothing
download
to be
it.
sorry.
Next
Okay.
time. Next
All
time,
right.
my friend.
Okay. So Sue Spicer, you want to read for us number 3?
Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachami said that Rabbi Yonatan said Bezalel was called by that name on account of his wisdom. When the Holy One, blessed be he, said to Moses, "Go say to Bezalel, make a tabernacle, an ark, and vessels." Moses went and reversed the order and told Bezalel, "Make an ark and vessels and a tabernacle." He said to Moses, Moses, our teacher, the way of the world is that a person builds a house and only afterward places the vessels in it. And you say to me, make an ark and vessels and a tabernacle. The vessels that I make, where shall I put them? Perhaps God told you the following, make a tabernacle, ark, and vessels. Moses said to Bezalel, perhaps you were in God's shadow and you knew.
Okay, so folks that got lost, it's kind of a simple idea that there are two verses, very brief verses that can easily get lost in the narrative that kind of contradict each other. In the way that we speak, we're not always careful as to the order of the words in our sentences. We're more concerned about getting all the whole thing idea. And very often, if we're in a conversation, we're more concerned about saying it loudly and quickly so that we can get in what we want to say, right? We're not, but here, the assumption that the words of the book of Exodus are exact, there's a slight reversal of order. And so Bezalel, is told you got to do this before this, but that doesn't make sense to him because where are you going to put it? Especially such a holy object. You got to think. You do this, which is an engineer's way of thinking, right? Right. This is the people that know how to make stuff. It's people like me. Well, can't you do this and this? We got this guy fixing all the issues in my mother's house. He says, yeah, you need to understand before you do that, you got to do this, whatever. So, because I don't think in those terms. Okay. So what's nice about this is I love the way that they speak to each other, or he's speaking to his leader, right? He's the one who the Talmud designates as the leader we're talking about, right? Bezalel, but he speaks to his leader, Moshe Rabbeinu, right? Moses, our teacher. That's the term for Moshe. It's not just in the same, it's Moses, Moses, our teacher, Moshe Rabbeinu. Could it be possibly? Did you get it wrong? Did you get it mixed up? And then Moses, instead of saying, no, just do it the way I told you, or instead of saying, okay, so you caught me, I got it wrong, Moses quips back, according to this midrash, right? This imagined tale here of late rabbinic, post-biblical storytelling. Hey, maybe, could it be that you were like hiding behind the rock and you heard God say this? You heard it the right way? And all this in order to give us a play on words, because his name, Bezalel, that's how you have here. If you break it down into two words, it's Betzel, in the shadow, El, of God. Perhaps you were lurking in the shadows in a good way, lurking in a good way, right? Bezalel. So the word play is something that that you find, everywhere. Right. Remember, we had it in previous pages here. Og Melech Bashan, Og the king of Bashan, and breaking that down to in tooth, Shane, Bashan, and then that story about his teeth getting longer. Okay. All right. Anything? Comments? Okay, Sid, number 4.
Rav Yehuda said that Rav said, Bezalel knew how to join the letters with which heaven and earth were created. It is written here, and I have filled him with the Spirit of God in wisdom and in understanding and in knowledge and in all manner of workmanship. And it is written there, the Lord by wisdom founded the earth. By understanding, he established the heavens. And it is written, by his knowledge, the depths were broken up and the skies dropped down the dew.
Okay. So this is a little bit hard in translation because, again, it's based on words, on key words in these verses. And those telephone poles that go and then you attach those disparate verses together to get the picture that proves in a rabbinic midrashic way that Bezalel was able to do what God did. Bezalel had but Salah was one of those individuals that you could say was truly created in God's image, not the physical image, but the ability to create. So we're not going to get into what does that mean in Genesis and what is it, does it have to do with talking? Does it have to do with creative process, things that perhaps differentiate us from the rest of the animal world? But let's suffice it to say here that the rabbis are talking about this way of creating things through manipulating the letters of the alphabet. Now, for all those that have studied here Kabbalah, and I'm not really one of them, I mean, I had to take the prerequisite introductory courses to Kabbalah. Mine was with Professor Moshe Idel, really one of the greats. I can't say I understood much of what he said when he taught us in rabbinical school. I didn't study in university Kabbalah at all. I wasn't attracted to it, and that is a topic. It's a very very well researched, only since the 20th century, right? Of academics of the middle 20th century, Gershom Scholem especially, what led the way in the academic study of Kabbalah, or Jewish mysticism, I should say. Kabbalah is just part of Jewish mysticism. But I do remember studying with Professor Idel a passage maybe I should have brought it, but yeah. So do you know the word abracadabra? So that is based on a Talmudic sentence. Abracadabra. I will create with words. That's abracadabra is based on Aramaic, and this idea in Jewish mysticism of tziruf otiyot. Is there anybody here who studies Kabbalah?
Mm-mm.
Maybe somebody could explain it better than me. But tziruf Kabbalah. I should have brought up something from Bill's collection because he has a great collection. Sometimes you see these; they look like tic-tac-toe, or they look like these puzzles, with different letters. What are they called? The ones where you put. The mom used to like to do with an S, where you put letters in boxes. Yeah. So or you see people on the airplane doing that. There's a way of doing that. It's a Kabbalistic practice of moving things in the world. I don't understand this, and that's kind of what's being said here. This idea that the alphabet, the Hebrew alphabet, is not just like any other alphabet in the world. The alphabet. Interesting, by the way, that alphabet is named after our alphabet, right? A and B. There's something more mystical about it, and God created the world with words, right? And God spoke, and those things happen. That gives you in Christianity the whole idea of logos, which was taken developed really by Philo, the Jew from Alexandria. And others can talk about that if they'd like to add something, if it strikes some sort of a memory, but that's the interesting thing here. And I'm not the right guy to really plug us into what's going on in rabbinic times with Jewish mystics. There was a long time when people said the rabbis of Talmud were anti-mystic, and Professor anyway, my teacher, that's one of his main parts of body of study of research, was to show no, this stuff existed already in rabbinic times and not just in the Middle Ages. Okay. Not just in rabbinic times, but amongst the rabbis of the Talmud. Yes, Harold.
Can you say again the translation of abracadabra?
Better yet, I will, why don't I find the passage?
Okay.
But basically is Abras Olive Bet Resh Aleph, which is the Bet Resh Aleph is to create.
From Bore?
Yeah, exactly. And Kedabra is Kamo, the Kaf, which is like Dalid Bet Resh Aleph Lidaber.
Okay. Because I thought it meant something like it shall come to pass as was spoken. But that doesn't.
Yeah, that's a more drawn out. That's exactly what I'm saying.
But you said the translation was "I will create what I have spoken."
I think so. If it's the olive beforehand, but I would need to check. But because it comes from a particular story about like a golem kind of a story, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
A pre-golem, a predecessor to the golem of Prague story.
Okay, a proto-golem.
Proto-golem,
All right.
proto-Talmudic, Babylonian Talmudic golem.
Okay.
Malka, do you have anything to enlighten us on this?
No.
You always know these esoteric facts about things. Okay. All
Not
right.
this one, yeah.
All right, then. So, let's go on, unless there's any other questions. Madalena, you want to do us the honors? We are in number 5.
Rabbi Yohanan said, "The Holy One, blessed be he, only grants wisdom to one who already possesses wisdom. As it is stated, he gives wisdom unto the wise, and knowledge to they who know understanding." Rav the Halifa from the west heard this and repeated it before Rabbi Abahu, who said to him, "You learned from there, we learned it from here, as it is written, in praise of the builders of the tabernacle. And in the hearts of all who are wise-hearted, I have placed wisdom."
Okay, so here there's the content of what's being said, and there's the way it's being said. It's being presented, the form, right? The literary content, the literary form here. So first, let's talk about the content. This is a little challenging, right? It's kind of like in the United States, one grants wealth to those who are already wealthy, right? Can you ever get ahead? Can you? Yes, go ahead, Eileen.
As an educator, I would highly dispute this. People have the capacity to learn given the opportunity, not only those who are wise already.
Yeah.
Could it be, well, maybe that's a way to see it, is that the wise, or those who have some kind of wisdom or knowledge already, know to recognize something new, or know where I don't know, that's the idea.
So Madalena, maybe what you're saying is that people that have natural talent, they can look. We're born with different. It's Eileen. Even as an educator, I'm guessing you do not share the old notion that anybody can do anything.
That's correct.
Right. So some people are born hardwired chemically. That's part of it. Some people are born into wealth or an advantage, having the advantages of tutors and better schools and books and role models and all sorts of things, right? So there is something to this, right? In other words, can anybody be anything? I think is not, and this has to do with Daniel being the quintessential wise person. One of the things when we studied, those of us that studied together Daniel a few years ago, one of the ideas that struck me in studying it together was that this was the new Torah, that this was the new form of worship. The temple is destroyed. These Jews are in exile. So what do we do? How do we come closer to God? And prayer is in there a little bit, and the Tractate of Talmud bases some of the laws of prayer on some of those verses in Daniel, but mostly Daniel, how do we worship God? Through wisdom. That I think that's kind of one of the main points. We can differ, right? We don't have to agree with that, but so I think that's playing on Daniel thing. Now Rabbi Tachlifa, who b'ma'arav, he's in the west. Where's the west? Would you say, if we're studying the Babylonian Talmud?
Babylon.
It's in Israel.
Right, land of Israel. So in the Babylonian Talmud, when it says b'ma'arava, in the west, that means somebody who has the tradition of the Torah, of the rabbinic traditions of the land of Israel. And so it's not that Rav Tachlifa says something different, quoting Rabbi Abahu, from a content point of view, but from a form point of view, well, it is content as well. He just quotes a different verse. And in other words, we both agree that this is a fact of life, but we just disagree where you learn it from, right? So it's two competing or two alternative truths or equations, if there's such a thing. If Dan was here, I would ask him, is there such a thing that you can reach the same answer in mathematics with two ways of doing the equation? I don't know. I have no idea. Is that possible? Is anybody here now? I don't know. Okay. All right then. Any comments or questions? Okay, Harold, number 6, please.
Rav Hizda said, one should see any dream and not a fast. Rashi, one should not fear dreams that are dreamt when fasting. Aruch, every dream has some reality, except that which one dreams while fasting.
Okay, so I'm going to interrupt you at every line here because it's this is one of those boom, ba-boom, ba-boom. Okay, so Rav Hizda, before we get to trying to understand it, this very problematic words here that in Hebrew are just 4 words, kol chalom v'lo tavot. Why is he talking about dreams? If you can see the little print that I put in there, because I wanted to make sure everything fit on 2 sides of the paper, right? The section that we ended with last week was Rav Yehuda said, in the name of Rav, 3 matters require mercy: a good king, a good year, and a good dream. Okay, so now it talked a little bit about leadership. Didn't talk about the king at all. Instead, it talked about leadership with Salah. That's an interesting way, and that is the fruit of the editorial of the editor here, right? Those are the pieces that have been juxtaposed. It just shows you the power of an editor, right? If we didn't know already. And then, so that's why Rav Chizda is talking about dreams. And the next many pages of the Talmud are going to be talking about dreams. This is the beginning of what's called Sefer HaChalamot, at least in Talmudic study circles, the Book of Dreams, and it has a lot of parallels in Persian literature, and I think possibly in Greek or Latin literature, if I remember correctly. I am looking for the book. I have a friend who wrote his doctoral dissertation on these pages of the Talmud in Jewish folklore and literature. He's now a professor at the university in Beersheba. And I can't find the book yet. It's either Sasha and I have been looking for it. It's not in the house, but it means it's in those boxes in the garage, which I dread looking through. And we're going to try to find it. I do have one article that he published in English. Everything else is in Hebrew. That when we get to that section, I will share with you so you can read an academic article that talks about a particular passage that we're doing. But right now, that's how we got to this, that we got to the dreams because of that. Right? That's something about the interpretation. Now, as to these words, kol chalom, which can be any dream or every dream, and velo tavot, which means and not fasting. It's very cryptic. Some scholars have said there's something wrong with the text. Is just we're missing words, right? But Rashi gives one interpretation, which is actually not what I wrote. What I wrote here is a mistake. I mistakenly translated the words as should not fear dreams, because that's what I wanted Rashi to say. Then I look back at the language, that's not what it means. It would be spelled differently. It's that one should not see, and see here probably means examine. One should not closely examine dreams that you dreamt on while you're fasting. In other words, if other dreams are important to look at, to interpret, but if it's a dream that you're on Yom Kippur or another day when you're fasting, trying to say that it's that lack of food which affects your mind. It gives you dreams which don't go there. They're garbage. Which is interesting because we, right, in contemporary science about dreams, at least my understanding is that's where dreams are where our minds throw out all the garbage, right? Which is why we get these bizarre combinations of things. Okay, but now we have a list of other things that Rav Hizda says about dreams. So it seems that according to the Talmud, Rav Hizda is an important expert on dreams. He's the Sigmund Freud of Babylonian Jewry. Go ahead.
And Rav Hizda said, a dream not interpreted is like a letter not read.
Care to comment on that, anybody? what the image, it's like, you've got this envelope here. It's a letter from so-and-so. And you don't
Well,
open it up, you don't read it,
you know,
just put it on the shelf.
According to psychoanalytic theory, all dreams have meaning, so it agrees with this.
Yeah, but we're gonna see, okay, so, yeah. And by the way, I don't know if I'm sure that Chaim in his doctorate, in his book, dealt with the connection. I forgot, I read it years ago. I forgot if he deals with Freud and if Freud had any connection with Babylonian Talmud. People like to talk about Freud's Judaism mostly because he was born a Jew, but the only book that I read of Freud that talks about Jewish literature is a book that he has on Moses that I have in my library. But otherwise, I don't think Freud knew much about Jewish literature. In any case, but these are perhaps just truths that people know.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, is
Yeah.
that in psychoanalytic theory, is that all dreams, any dream, every single dream that you have, it's your own creation. So it's you talking to yourself. So you may not know what the meaning is, but it needs to be interpreted and figured out.
Right, so that's what this says, right? We're going to
Right.
see a contradiction to that in other parts of the text going forward, but that's what that line says, absolutely. Let's go on to the next one.
And Rav Hizda said, a good dream is not entirely fulfilled, and a bad dream is not entirely fulfilled.
Okay. Meaning?
Could it mean that they're just possibilities, dreams?
Means take a deep breath. Yes, that's what you dreamt, but doesn't mean you're going to die today. Or take a deep breath. Yes, that's what you dreamt, but that doesn't mean you're going to win the $1.5 billion in the lottery.
Oh, no.
I know. Malka, you thought that dream was going to come true, right?
Well, I was hoping it would go to more than one person. It just went to one person.
Well, maybe he'll be charitable. Who knows? Okay.
Was it you?
I think it was Florida. It wasn't in California. I think it was,
Oh, right, that's right.
but who knows? Maybe I have agents in different states that, I want to be able to give anonymously, like according to the Rambam, Maimonides, then I gotta cover my tracks. Claire, do you know what we're talking about?
No, not really.
There was
There's
just
a big lottery that I
there was
kinda
a
get the
lottery
gist
that was
of
$1.5 billion.
that didn't make the news over here.
Yeah. These are the things that French people hate most about Americans, I think. Okay. All right, then. So let's go ahead.
And Rav Hizda said, a bad dream is preferable to a good dream. Steinsaltz said, since a bad dream causes one to feel remorse and to repent.
Right. So you want to talk about dreams? Better you should have a bad dream. That'll improve your behavior. If you have a good dream, you're going to feel mabsut. You're going to feel, good with yourself. You're satisfied. All right. It seems like somebody was in the corner jotting down, Rav Chisda's secretary and had an index card, dreams, and then had little bullet points of things, right? Of what else he had. Let's see. But now we go from Rav Chisda. Go ahead. Sorry, one more.
And Rav Hizda said, a bad dream, his sadness is enough for him. A good dream, his joy is enough for him.
Yeah, I'm not sure I entirely understand what that means. But, I think it might mean, again, take a deep breath. You'll have some sadness at this. You'll have some happiness at this dream. It's enough. That don't blow things out of proportion, but I could be wrong. And we go to Rav Yosef now.
Rav Yosef said, even for me, the joy of a good dream negates it. In Steinsaltz, even Rav Yosef, who was blind and ill, derived such pleasure from a good dream that it was never actually realized.
Right. So here's something about now, in light of what Rav Yosef said about Rav Chisda's last dictum, is that dreams are a telling of, in some way, dreams are the telling of a future, right? That's not all of what dreams are here, but in many of the cases we're going to have, that's I forgot who says, I don't know if it's rabbinic literature or if it's Maimonides maybe, that dreams are 1/60th of prophecy, right? So something that's going to come true in the future, but doesn't necessarily come true. So if it's a bad dream and it causes you to repent, and hopefully that won't come true, right? That's the idea. But here, see, we would not have known without Steinsaltz, right? I wouldn't have known, but I guess people that study a lot of Talmud would know that Rav Yosef was blind and ill. So if he has a good dream, is that going to become reality? And what Rav Yosef says, what Rav Yosef is saying in Steinsaltz's understanding is that no, it won't, because Rav Yosef was happy enough to have the dream. Let me have the fan. Don't break down my fan. Let me have my little fantasy. Let me have my little dream. Yeah, and okay, we can draw parallels, but okay. So let's go ahead.
And Rav Hizda said, a bad dream is worse than lashes. As it is stated, God has so made it that men should fear before him. Ecclesiastes. And Rabbi Bar Hana said that Rabbi Yohanan said, that is speaking of a bad dream.
Okay, so Rav Hizda utilizing a verse in Ecclesiastes, which has already been understood by Rabbi Bar Hana, who quotes Rabbi Yochanan in saying that verse in Ecclesiastes deals with a bad dream. Okay, in other words, that's the worst punishment you could have. Hyperbole. And what I think one thing we can take from this is that it doesn't seem like Rav Hizda sat down in his study and wrote an essay on dreams, or a well thought out philosophy or theory about dreams. Right? These are snippets of things that he said at different times that don't necessarily agree with each other. And this is kind of an emblem of what's going to come forward, what we're going to be met with in the weeks to come, with this kind of disparate traditions, some really bizarre traditions about what different dreams mean, and how do you know what a dream means, and how do you find out, and what do you do? But let's end today with number 7, which connects what I said, to dream to prophecy. Rita Claire, would you read this last section for us, number 7?
The prophet that has a dream, let him tell a dream. And he that has my word, let him speak my word faithfully. What has the straw to do with the grain, says the Lord? What do straw and grain have to do with a dream? Rather, Rabbi Yohanan said in the name of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, as it is impossible for the grain to grow without straw, so too it is impossible to dream without nonsense.
I love this one. This is a nice way for us to think. Again, this is in the category of take a deep breath. But Rabbi, I had this dream. Take a deep breath. So may we go forward in this week with being able to discern between the straw and the grain, and realize that there is no grain without the straw. Any final comments, folks? Questions or comments? Yes, Rita Claire.
I'm surprised that you haven't mentioned anything about King Nebuchadnezzar having his dreams and having it interpreted.
So you shouldn't be surprised, because remember, we're just in the beginning of a long section.
Okay.
So if we study it, and I don't think we're going to fit, in all honesty, I don't think we're going to make it through the entire section. It's really, really long. And I think we might take a break at some point to regroup. We do have, we're going to be starting a mini series in person, and I don't know that it will be Zoomed. We're doing this with St. Paul's, the Episcopal Church nearby, and we're going to start that in the fall. And that's going to be Thursday afternoons, most probably, although we have to work it out still. And then with Steve Kinney, it looks like I have a feeling we're going to be doing Isaiah. We're going to go to Hebrew Bible for a section. That'll be Thursday mornings, back to that slot. So we have to kind of regroup in a few weeks from now in any case. and see where we go. But Rita Claire, if we were to do the whole section from dreams, then you could say, I'm surprised he didn't talk about, right? Right. You know, I always love that in the scholarly conferences you go to, and they get 20, like at the World Congress of Judaic Studies at Hebrew University every 5 years, I think it was, and you get 20 minutes. You had 20 minutes to make your presentation. And then there would always be some person who would get up and say, I'm surprised you didn't mention he had 20 minutes, right? And by the way, the surprise you didn't mention was something that person had usually wrote about, right? But in your case, Rita Claire, it's good that you remember Nebuchadnezzar, and it's good you remember Daniel, and absolutely Daniel plays a big part in teaching us about dreams. Yeah, thank you. Okay.
Also, was it also Joseph?
Joseph.
The other big interpreter, Joseph and Daniel, and connections that those two stories make with wording and those two characters in the Hebrew Bible. Yeah, I don't know much about are there stories in the Gospels about dreams? Claire or anybody else? Okay, I don't know.
Well, I just think this last number 7, this one made me think of the maxim, there's no free lunch.
There's no free there's no free dream. There's no nonsense free dreams. There you go. Okay. All right, everybody. Won't see you next week, but see you in 2 weeks from now, okay?
Bye, everybody.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.